Hi guys, I'm Matt Schlicht with ZapChain, and I'm here with Daniel Cawrey from CoinDesk. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for being a part of the Bitcoin course. So Daniel basically has written more articles about Bitcoin than probably anybody else, but I will let you kind of talk a little bit about what you do at CoinDesk.
So I've been with CoinDesk since the beginning, back in May of 2013, and I have written many articles about Bitcoin. Now I mostly write features, and I cover Bitcoin startups in Silicon Valley. So that's what I do.
It's awesome. So if you guys have a Bitcoin startup that you're working on, maybe at some point you can reach out to Daniel or the rest of the CoinDesk team, and maybe they'll write about you guys. So we're just trying to help these guys understand more about Bitcoin, and I think you'll have a lot to say about that. So kind of Bitcoin can be really confusing, and that's difficult. And we were wondering, when did you first learn about it? And when you learned about it, like, were you confused by it?
I was confused about it. I first read about Bitcoin in June of 2011. It was in a Business Week article. The title of it was something like "Bitcoin: The Currency for Nerds," and it just didn't interest me. The way that the article explained it just sounded too abstract, especially the part about mining. And so I sort of left it on the shelf until probably the end of 2012. I started looking at the price. At that time, the price was around $12 to $15, and I still didn't think it was ready for prime time. And then in 2013, in April of 2013, that's when the price first hit around $100. And I said, this is something that I want to get into. This is something that it's somehow past a threshold in my mind that this was going to be something big. And so that's when I decided that I wanted to get into Bitcoin. And so I started writing about it. That was something that I was good at. And the community at the time was mostly developers. So writing for me was something I'm stronger at than software development. So that's how I became, I guess, a Bitcoin writer. So
that's awesome. I mean, yeah. So when, like, did you make that decision based on the increase in value of Bitcoin? Was that kind of why you felt like it was going somewhere?
It was the increase in value, and I have found that the increase in value is what drives interest in Bitcoin, for sure. The price is something that people are really fixated on. They want to know more about Bitcoin as the price goes up.
So when Bitcoin rose to like, what was it, like $1,300 per Bitcoin at some point, did you notice a huge increase in interest at that time?
The whole community saw a huge increase. We saw Wall Street interested, we saw venture capitalists interested, we saw a lot of investment in Bitcoin startups as a result of the price going up.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's when I got super interested.
A lot of people I talk to, especially in startups, when did you come up with your startup idea? And they say usually, late 2013, and I instantly say that's correlated to the price. And some people don't even make that connection anymore. Right. But working at CoinDesk, I see how the price interacts with eyeballs, basically. When people are looking at Bitcoin news or want to know what's going on with Bitcoin, it has a lot to do with the price.
If the price drops, do you get a lot of eyeballs too?
We also get a lot of interest when the price drops, and usually the price will drop based on bad news, something bad happening, maybe a bank coming out with maybe bearish news, or a government saying something negative about Bitcoin. We'll see that too. So we get interest when the price goes up. We get interest when things are going badly, because people are still trying to figure out what this all really means. And I don't think any of us really know quite yet what Bitcoin is really going to be all about, other than it's a very interesting technology to be following.
Which almost makes it more interesting, because we don't even know who made it. And then we're just trying to figure out, like, what do we do with this? And like, we've progressed, but I don't think anyone can say we know what this is going to look like in 2 years or 3 years. Like, it's really difficult, but it's also kind of what makes it awesome.
Well, it's really interesting because it's such a multifaceted technology. It can be a payment method, it can be a store of value, and it can also be a public recording mechanism. So there's a lot of things that will be built off this technology, and there's a lot of smart people that are working on it today.
Yep. So For everyone watching, I think you're probably a really good person because of just the number of articles you've written, the number of people you've talked to in the Bitcoin industry, and probably you, maybe out of most people, have gotten asked what is Bitcoin
Sure.
a lot. So
Yes.
how would you explain in kind of a simple, high level, like what is Bitcoin? Because I think a lot of people think just the currency aspect.
Sure. When someone asks me this question, my best answer is Bitcoin is internet money you can send like email. That, on a basic level, is something that everyone can understand because most people send email, they realize it's easy, they don't need to understand how it works on the back end. So it's interesting because my previous experience before getting into Bitcoin is that I was a consultant helping with email systems. So I was moving old email systems to new email systems, and there's a lot that goes into those types of things, but people don't need to know that. They just need to know how to send email. So that's the best explanation. Now, there are other things that you can use Bitcoin for. Bitcoin allows people that don't want to use a bank account or don't have a bank account to store money. It also has a public record called the blockchain that allows people to see everything that's going on in Bitcoin through the transactions on a public ledger, which is novel technology that isn't really used in finance today.
Right.
So those are the things that I think are the most important to explain. But I still would continue to say that Bitcoin is internet money that can be sent like email. That's the best explanation.
What do you think, like, when people are being educated on Bitcoin right now, whether they're getting that information from the media, or they're just like they're looking through forums, or they're on Reddit, or they're looking somewhere, what do you think they're getting confused about? Like, what do you think the misconceptions about Bitcoin are right now for the public?
Yeah, I think the misconception is, so I work in media now, and I understand sort of the thinking of the mainstream media, and this is not their fault, but so their issue is a lot of them, they'll have an editor or someone who they work for say, hey, we need you to write a story about Bitcoin. But that person in the mainstream media doesn't cover Bitcoin all the time, so they don't completely have that connection. They don't have that deep understanding what Bitcoin really is as a technology. So the majority of people today get their information from the mainstream press, and I don't feel like they always get the right explanation. One of the reasons is because, let's be honest, people like to read about things like train wrecks. So when Bitcoin hits the mainstream press, it's often because of something bad. We're getting a lot more positive stories with merchants, large merchants accepting Bitcoin and things like that, but still all of the information comes from what people see on television or the mainstream press. People don't know what CoinDesk is. People just don't. It has a very niche reader base, and we do get mainstream writers that do read CoinDesk, but there still isn't really very many that are super versed in Bitcoin. The Wall Street Journal does have a blog that they have now called the BitBeat, and so they have a couple of guys that are that I've one guy that I've met and I've talked to a lot, and he seems to know a lot, Michael Casey. But there isn't a whole lot of people on the Bitcoin beat, I guess, other than CoinDesk. So
how do we fix that? Because it's a pretty big problem if the mainstream media is not understanding Bitcoin, because it takes a little bit to understand Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're telling the world either Bitcoin is bad. We had Mt. Gox, that crashed. People lost, $400 million. We had Silk Road. People were using Bitcoin to buy illegal drugs. But that's not really the story behind Bitcoin. That's not why we're all so excited about it. Do you think there's something we can do to kind of help that, or is it kind of just it takes time?
Well, I think that's a great question, and that's one of the reasons why I cover Bitcoin startups, because it's really going to be innovation in the technology through Bitcoin startups. And I don't know if we're quite there yet. We're getting closer now, but I don't think that there's been the right technology that's come across to say, hey, I can use this technology and it's super simple for me to use. I just don't think that's happened yet, but it's one of the reasons why I'm so interested in Bitcoin startups.
Right. So if someone, if we were to go hit up all these writers, at whatever publication they work at, and we were to go tell them to go to some websites to go learn more about Bitcoin.
Sure.
Like obviously CoinDesk is a really great place, especially if you want to keep up on like the beat and like what new companies and the funding and kind of the innovations. But are there some other websites that you would recommend to people that are trying to learn about Bitcoin for the first time?
That's a great question. I think CoinDesk is important. CoinDesk also has an informational section. I don't think of too many other places offhand right now that are really great unbiased resources for what Bitcoin really is. I've looked at, I actually did look at some sites today that try to explain it. There's a really great video that has been done. I can't remember the name of it right now. It's something like I think it's just what is Bitcoin.
Yep.
And that's one that I like to show people because some people don't want to go read the Satoshi Nakamoto white paper, or they don't want to go read or digest all this information.
Right.
And to your question, how do we tell the media to go read this information? I think that's a challenge for them because there isn't an incentive for them to go do that right now. So, yeah, that's my answer.
Maybe they're watching right now.
I hope they are.
If you guys are watching, then we commend you because you're gonna deliver better news now. Understand more about what you're talking about.
Sure. Yeah.
Makes me happy. So you've been in Bitcoin for 2 years now?
Almost 2 years. Yeah.
Almost 2 years
Yeah.
now, and so you've seen it from when the price was like, $10, less than $10. Now it's hovering around $500 ish.
Yeah.
Like a lot has happened in the Bitcoin industry. There's been companies that have come up, there's been companies that have gone away.
Right.
From your perspective of writing about these companies pretty much almost every day, like what are kind of the changes in the Bitcoin industry that you've seen over the past 2 years?
I think we're seeing a lot of people who are very interested in the technology and want to develop on top of the technology. And the smartest people that want to do that are getting the venture capital investment to do that today. And many of them are perfectly happy with dealing with the regulation and compliance that comes with that because their stakeholders, the venture capital investors, want them to do that in order to succeed. So,
I mean, what you guys published a stat about the amount of investment that's gone into Bitcoin companies, and I think it was over $260 million venture capital has been put into Bitcoin companies, and more than 50% of that was in this year alone, in 2014. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's actually a difficult number for me to keep track of because it keeps changing.
Yep.
But those numbers sound accurate. We do a quarterly report on Bitcoin. We also do an annual report called the State of Bitcoin, and we'll have our third quarter one fairly soon.
Yeah,
so,
that's exactly where I got that information from.
Yeah, we do reports because we feel it's necessary. There's no one else doing that. We've got a great guy at CoinDesk named Garrick Hillman, and he works for the London School of Economics, and he works on that report for us, and he does a great job. Yeah.
Cool. So what do you think is going to be next? Like, is it smart contracts? Is it crypto, like equity? Like, what do you think the next innovation in Bitcoin is going to be?
That is a really interesting question, and what I hope it will be, I'm sure crypto equity and smart contracts and things like that will come. The issue with those in particular is there's still a huge amount of regulatory and legal questions about how that's all going to work. So I think really what needs to happen is there needs to be sort of a continuation of this talk between banks and Bitcoin companies about where we're going to go and how we're going to make this a mainstream use case, which it still hasn't happened at this point, and I hope it will soon, but we're still not there.
Is that the app you're kind of looking out for?
Yeah, well, so there is no app for that, right? There is no central app that makes Bitcoin super easy and gives people a really good use case for it. So we're seeing some interesting innovations in the mobile payment space, especially with Apple. So I'm hoping that there will be a competitor to that will use Bitcoin as sort of the payment rail, so to speak. So for all the people that are watching, they may not have any Bitcoin yet, sure.
But they're obviously interested in Bitcoin if they're watching this. Where do you think the best place is right now because obviously this could change, but right now, what do you think the best place is for someone that's new to Bitcoin to go actually get their Bitcoin? And then once they have it, should they be storing it kind of with those services, or do you think they should go through the process of storing it locally?
That's a great question, and there are so many options available today that simply didn't exist a year ago. I think the first question that somebody needs to ask themselves is where do you live? And that will sort of dictate where you'll get Bitcoin from. If we're talking about in the United States, obviously Coinbase has been really great about helping people move US dollar into Bitcoin.
Yep.
You also have options like the Bitcoin ATM industry is an example of where you can go up to a machine, give it cash, and it will give you Bitcoin. There's also a company called GoGoCoin, and they do Bitcoin gift cards basically that you can buy, and then you have Bitcoin. So those are some of the easiest ways I think you can get Bitcoin. It really does depend on how well-versed you are in technology and also where you live.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to get a Bitcoin gift card.
Sure.
That would be pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, thank you for kind of walking us through how you've seen Bitcoin, the changes you've seen in Bitcoin. I think you are part of a very small group of people that have just been watching Bitcoin closely enough to have a perspective like this. And I'm sure everyone watching is super appreciative of it too.
Well,
So,
I appreciate taking the time to do this.
awesome.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Bye, guys.
See you.